Hello and welcome to Behind the Headlines. I've got another great guest for you. We're gonna get into all things China. We're gonna talk about the U.S. propaganda about China and whether it's propaganda or maybe the U.S. government just is totally telling the truth about everything. They're known for doing that, right? We're gonna get into so many important topics. I also hope you check out all of our other interviews we've done recently. I just talked to the guys from the Gorilla History podcast yesterday. Talked to Stella Assange, Julian Assange's wife, Scott Ritter, Richard Wolff, Chris Hedges. It's all at youtube.com/behind the headlines. And you can check those out anytime. All right. Well, please hit thumbs up and share this and all that good stuff. And let's get started. Today, I am speaking to Jingjing Li. She's a journalist and host for CGTN. She hosts the two hugely popular shows, On the Road and Talk It Out. And she's coming to us from Beijing. So, hello, Jingjing Li.
Hey. Hi, Lee. Thanks for having me. So happy to be back on your show.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. This is exciting. This is the first live stream we've done from Beijing. So, how are things going there? I know you're in the New Year festivities.
Yeah, it's great because probably many of you already know that we are celebrating the Chinese New Year these days. We are having this 7-day national holiday. So I will apologize in advance if I'm not articulate enough later in this interview because I've been overeating, over drinking the past few days, and not enough sleeping because partying every day. And I could hear some people setting off fireworks nearby. So maybe during this interview, you will hear fireworks. So well, but you can see we are in a very festive, happy mood.
That sounds good. A funny story. The only time I've kind of celebrated the Chinese New Year was when I went to perform in San Francisco, and it was a Chinese theater, and I thought that was neat. But the booker failed to inform me that it was in the midst of Chinese New Year celebration in Chinatown in San Francisco, and there were so many fireworks going off that it was shaking the theater. Like you couldn't, even with a microphone, people couldn't hear me.
Yeah, exactly. And now it's happening every day across the whole China because it's the kind of the festival tradition that we do, fireworks. And we invented the fireworks.
That's true. That's true. You guys know how to do them.
Nice.
So, I just want to get into all of the propaganda we hear in the U.S. We have so little coming from the other side, or even a measured amount of response to the endless number of stories we now hear about China. For many years recently, up until, I don't know, 5 years ago or something, there was not a lot of anti-China rhetoric in our news. There was very little news about China, and the news we did get was largely positive. But then, starting 5-6 years ago, our government decided it was time to ramp up the new Cold War with China, and now we just get an endless flood of all of the horrific things China has apparently just begun doing yesterday. I don't know where exactly to start, but I suppose the biggest recent story that we've been hearing a lot about is China has decreased or ended the lockdown policy there. And our media is saying, oh my God, China has done this horrific thing. Before it was horrific that China had a lockdown, and now it's horrific that China doesn't have a lockdown.
Yeah, exactly. Like you mentioned, this anti-China narrative on several Western mainstream media has gone crazy in past few years. Just like you mentioned, the COVID situation, those media were heavily attacking China's lockdowns just a few months ago, and now China lifts the lockdown and say, "Oh, they're not prepared. It's bad. They just lift the restrictions." And it's like I was like, make up your mind. What do you want? And
Right.
that now the focusing on China's COVID restrictions, because I was among the first group of reporters heading to Wuhan when the city was under lockdown,
Mm.
and so I pay a lot of attention to the Western mainstream media coverage back then as well. So now all the narratives are very similar to what we saw in 2020. At first, they attack the lockdowns. It's inhumane. It's taking people's liberty away. And now, when other countries start to have outbreaks, and they say, "Oh, you didn't contain it early enough. You are doing a bad job. You just let the virus spread to our countries." So they constantly change the narrative, and all these stories they concerned about it nowadays the same. So they are lacking of certain creativities to
Yeah.
forming creating negative stories about China. But the thing is, you look at the reality. Now,
How do I know there's beliefs on every side of every issue. That's how it is in a large country. But I'm wondering if you have a feeling for how Chinese people view the lockdown and now the easing of the lockdowns. Obviously, there are some protests, but there's protests in the U.S. too. There's protests in every country. So that doesn't necessarily speak to what most Chinese people feel.
yeah. So like you mentioned, there are different views about everything. And in China, we have 1.4 billion people. That's large population. No matter how Western media or politicians want to paint us as one thing, like all Chinese people have only one thinking. But no, we have very different opinions among our people because it's large population. So there are people like lockdowns. There's people that don't like lockdowns. And I understand other countries may have, people from other countries have the same feeling. They may agree with China's strict COVID policies, or they probably just strongly against it. I can't totally understand. But I just want to say why it's important. The strict lockdowns in the past 3 years was very necessary for China. I, as someone who not only was among the first group of reporters who went to Wuhan to cover the pandemic, I also lived through all these 3 years, very restrict COVID restrictions in China. So even though there are some strict restrictions, of course, there are some uneasy things to move around, but still we do it collectively because we know it's for the greater good. I can give you some data and examples why it's necessary. First, I think most of us still can remember how deadly the original variant of COVID was. It was so deadly, and and especially it's the people from elderly groups and the vulnerable groups. They are so vulnerable to COVID because their immune system was being destroyed by this COVID. So China, remember, I just mentioned we have 1.4 billion people. We are the largest population, but also we have an aging population. So, according to the latest data, China, the people above 60 in China has already achieved 267 million. 267 million. That's the population above 60. And already accounted for 18.9% of entire population in China. And it's estimated by 2035 that number could reach 400 million. So that's a lot more. So current number already almost very close to the entire population of the United States.
Yeah.
And the aging population will exceed the entire US population by 2035. That shows you how many old people we have, but also we have the people, in the vulnerable groups, like people have severe underlying issues like cancer or diabetes or all this disease that make you vulnerable to COVID. So just imagine if we didn't take the strict COVID measures, how many people would die.
Mm-hmm.
And if that happened, what are those media going to say? They'll say, see, China so is responsible. They just let people die. So
Right.
we didn't, right? That didn't happen. We take the strict measures to protect everyone. We didn't just abandon those people. So they're old, they're vulnerable, so leave them. No, we didn't do it. So the past 3 years, we protect everyone. And also, the 3 years was really buying the time to prepare ourselves. In the past 3 years, the hospital beds for in ICUs increased by 2.4 times. So like almost tripled. And the also the personnels like doctors, nurses also increased by 1/3. But and also it was crucial for us to buy in the time. And also during the 3 years, we know the COVID got less and less lethal. So now is Omicron is less deadly, and we are much better prepared.
Hmm.
Now is the better good time to lift the restrictions.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes a big difference. And you know, early in the pandemic, when I don't know, they had a different slant on the anti-China stuff. They were talking about how China, they actually, the U.S. media actually covered how China had built entire hospitals for COVID patients fairly quickly, like within the span of like a week. They they built like a hospital. The U.S. was doing nothing like that. I think at the time they slanted it as propaganda by saying, "Oh, clearly China's suffering because they're building hospitals." But sometimes they have to bend over backwards to turn a good story into propaganda. But I wanted to jump to another topic that was just a few months ago when Nancy Pelosi made her very inflammatory trip to Taiwan. Nancy Pelosi is, of course, the outgoing Speaker of the House. She was there for roughly 630 years, and she is incredibly corrupt, has hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, and felt impassioned that she had to visit Taiwan in order to piss off the Chinese. And I wonder if you could talk a little about that and what that trip meant and how it was covered in China.
Mm. That's something. Taiwan, the island, and is something very important to all of us, to every Chinese people. And it's Taiwan is part of China. It's not just me saying this. It's not just China saying this. It's recognized by every country that has a diplomatic relationship with China, including the United States. If you go to the U.S. government policies and papers online, you can just search it online. They said they recognize there's only one China. They will never support Taiwan independence. And so that's one of the fundamental reasons that China and the United States can have a diplomatic relationship. And also, United Nations also recognize there's only one China. And to resume China's seats back in the United Nations, they break the ties with the Taiwan, which was led by Chiang Kai-shek back then. So it's recognized by the every country, including United States. But you can also see they are playing the little word games on their media. They always refer Taiwan and China as two separate things, even though politically, diplomatically, they recognize Taiwan as part of China. And so I think a lot of
And
people.
I think a lot. Sorry, I just want to add in here because I don't know if you know how the average American views it, but I think a lot of people in America think that Taiwan is just a completely separate country that China is trying to steal or something. But in fact, China acknowledges Taiwan as part of China. Most of Taiwan acknowledges Taiwan as part of China, and most of the countries around the world acknowledge Taiwan as part of China.
Exactly. And I see sometimes the videos, the media, they always say, "Oh, will China invade Taiwan?" But how can China invade a part of their own territory?
Right.
It's recognized by the world.
Right.
And so they're playing this word game to make the public who are too lazy to do the research online. So they have the idea, oh, they think, oh, probably they're different, even though we speak the same language, we practice the very same customs and traditions. So that's the thing. And we always, but because of the historical reasons, and there are some how to say, conflicts between internally, but we want to sort this out all by ourselves, and we are not rushing it. No one's like, people from both sides are not rushing it, and most of people from both sides believe this is a we can sort it out in the long run. Want to sort it out peacefully, but it's the foreign forces, and it's particularly some politicians sponsoring a small group of separatists in the Taiwan Islands. And they start to train them to hate China or Chinese culture, even though they speak the same language and they are the Chinese people. They were, so there was a small group of separatists for their own political gains. They are doing this separatist movements, and they are sponsored by people from the United States and probably different parts of the world. But I can believe you, no Chinese from the mainland and those Chinese people on the Taiwan island who are not belong to the separatist groups want the Americans to intervene in this, because they all believe this is a domestic issues. And I want to also say this, like, because I think a lot of people, either from the West or from the separatist groups in Taiwan, they think, oh, we are fighting for freedom. We because we want different things. Americans fighting for our democracy and freedom. But is that really? I interviewed several Taiwan compatriots who just say, "What? No, they don't care about us." The United States basically seeing the Taiwan Islands as an unsinkable aircraft carrier, because if you look at the map, geopolitically, strategically, it's very close to Chinese mainland. It's if the Western powers control it, it's perfect to stick it to China and to control the whole Pacific region. And if you look at the military bases from the United States, it's encircling China on the Pacific Ocean, from Guam, from all these islands, from the Philippines, from Okinawa. It's all circling across, circling Taiwan island, circling Chinese mainland, and in order to control this region, the Pacific region, and also stick it to China, they committed horrendous crimes in those countries with their military bases. You can ask Okinawans, the indigenous people, what happened to their hometown when their U.S. military bases in the center of their cities that they cannot cross, and they protest on a daily basis, but no U.S. soldiers give a damn. And they polluted their waters. They're only drinking water resources by doing all this testing their weapons, and they are committed crimes towards local people, towards the women, towards the children. And not to mention, I think there's also documentary about what happened on Guam. You can look it up on YouTube. It's everywhere. So just to have this military power to control this Pacific region, they don't care about the local people in all those islands. And you would think they will care about the people on Taiwan Islands. No. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the U.S. has largely surrounded China with military bases, but you got to ask yourself, why did China decide to put itself in between our military bases?
Yeah, same with the Middle East. How dare you to put your country in the middle of our military bases, right?
Right. uh, yeah. What I wanted to get your view on why the U.S. is doing this now, these past few years. Why create this Cold War with China? I mean, I have my reasons I often talk about, but I wanted to hear from you your point of view, or maybe the point of view of a lot of Chinese people. Why is the U.S. deciding to do this now?
I think most people already believe that China's rise is unstoppable, but it feels like they are trying to do everything to slow this down, or maybe just to kick China down the hill, because they want to maintain their hegemony across the world. How can you maintain strong? By keeping others down. So, right? And also, maybe I think they are running out of time. because I think it's pretty clear, not just to Chinese people or people from the in different parts of the world, they're seeing China is rising economically, and more countries from different regions are willing to work with China. And that's a problem if you want to, if you are hegemony of, say, some Western countries. So they're really running out of time. It's very hilarious because I remember several years ago when Joe Biden was still not the president of the United States, when he visited China, he was visiting a school, local school in China, and he said to the kids that we are not afraid of China's rise. We welcome China's rise. So no, that's was when China was still relatively haven't achieved its current economic status. So that's what he said. But now we know China is basically the strategic rivalry, and China, Russia on the name of and also the well, I need to find the full name. It's the Countering Chinese Communist Party Malign Influence Act, passed by Congress. So and so they're seeing China as their strategic rivalry. So and also I think most Chinese people have realized that very clearly. And all the crises happening in the United States, say the gun violence, the racism, and their horrible management of COVID, also made a lot of Chinese people, not just people from everywhere, to see this illusion of the United States as the beacon of democracy, as the best governance mode in the world is collapsing. So I think now they have to do everything to maintain this illusion for everybody in the world, and also to maintain its hegemony.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that China's making deals or cooperating or working with a lot of other countries nowadays, and it's making the U.S. Nervous, to say the least, because we view it as our job to dominate other countries, and we don't want to see partnerships made outside of the United States. So I'd like to get to the heart of this argument. You hear it from a lot of people. You actually hear it from a lot of people, even on the left, that say that China, in their partnerships with, say, Africa, is economically colonizing Africa, or is economically doing the same thing that the U.S. does to a lot of countries. So I thought I'd start out by playing a clip of your interview first, and then we can get your thoughts as well. But this was an interview you did on your show with the president of the Socialist Party of Zambia, Fred Membe, and the convener of the Socialist Movement of Ghana, Karatewi Opoku. And here is their response to the kind of the question I just posed, essentially, on your show.
China has never sponsored a coup in any African country. Can the Western countries say the same? Who is our enemy? Who is our friend? Who is the imperial power over us? Is it China? The answer is a categorical no.
We know what imperialism is. It's not for them to try and bandy words around. There's a long history of imperialism in Africa, and it was not through the Chinese.
They think we can never have a relationship of equality with anybody else. And also there's a racist attitude in this. Do they think we Africans are fools? Who everybody should dominate the way they dominated us for over 500, 600 years? The Chinese should only come to dominate us? They don't see their domination of us as domination, as something wrong. But they see our association with the Chinese as domination, imperial domination. Let them remove this racist attitude, this racist arrogance, and they started to see us as human beings, deserving their respect, deserving their compassion. We have dignity. We have human dignity that deserves respect.
All right. I want to get your thoughts on what they were just saying.
Thank you so much for showing this clip of the interview I did with the two African leaders. And one of the reasons I always talk to people from those regions, I always talk to people from Africa, people from Latin America, people from Asia, to hear what do they think about their country, what's their worldview is like, why they hold such view. Unlike some Western mainstream media reporters, they like to speak on behalf of uh, my country or people from those regions. They like to, or they only interview people who are dissidents of a certain country or come from certain NGOs, some political groups that they sponsored. So I try to understand what do they think from the people from this region, like these two very intellectual African leaders, and they are very brave. And every time I talk to people from those regions, they will give you the view that never been shown by the Western mainstream media. Because most of the time, Western media or some politicians, when they go to these regions, they will say, "Don't work with China." They are shouting at the Africans like, "Don't work with China. China is trapping you." They go to Latin America, tell them, "Don't work with China. China is trapping you." So they like to give lectures. I mean, hundreds of years passed, they still love to give lectures to the global South. This is the thing. And they
Yeah.
wonder why you are not listening to me. And China, we had that history as well. We were colonized, we were invaded, and we were not even treated as humans. And now we are finally have our independence, and our GDP is growing, and we can say no. And so there's a trend globally that developing countries, the global South, want to get rid of this neoliberal oh, I forgot. Sorry, I lost my word. Still,
Neoliberalism.
yes.
Yeah.
Over drinking. Sorry. Right. And also, so I think it's important for people from everywhere, from the West, to start to look at the global South as equal human beings, try to understand what their culture is like, what do they want. And you mentioned why more countries are working with China. I think it's important to understand why these countries are not willing to work with the West anymore, right? So I can give you maybe the recent news, because just earlier this month in January, China's new foreign minister Jingjing, who was previously the China's ambassador to the United States, now is the foreign minister of China. He just visited several African countries. And this is important because this is the 33rd times that China's foreign minister paid its first overseas visit to Africa. Like, Africa is always the first destination for China's foreign minister in 33 years. So that shows the priority and consistency of China's foreign relations and diplomacy. And in the past few years, no matter how Western media how like to repeat the debt trap narrative, but in reality, China has built multiple infrastructures that are crucial for development in different African nations. And for example, I can give you some data. China has already built more than 6,000 kilometers of railways, 6,000 kilometers of roads, nearly 20 ports, and over 80 large-scale power facilities, and funded over 130 hospitals and clinics, over 170 schools, 45 sports venues, and over 500 agricultural projects. These are tangible outcomes that can boost the productivity of those countries and further develop its economic and social development and improving their people's livelihood eventually. And there are some projects just like the Addis Ababa to Djibouti Railway, which kicked off in 2018, I think. That's the very first electrified railway in Africa. And also, recently, during Jinggang's visit to Africa, he attended the inauguration of the Africa CDC building, which also China aided in the building. So these are the tangible outcomes they're seeing, and their lives could be changed through the Belt and Road Initiative, through through working with China. And what tangible outcomes do they have after decades or hundreds of years of communications with Europe, with the West? They were still trapped by hunger, by all kinds of horrendous crimes. So I think that's one of the reasons they want to work. They are probably not necessarily choosing China. They are just looking for an alternative.
Right.
The relationship, they are treated as an equal partner. They are respected. They are respected as a diplomat, as human beings. So instead of trying to find what problems China has, or what problems the Belt and Road Initiative has, I think it's really important for the Western leaders to reflect, to think why those countries don't want to work with you anymore, because you don't respect them.
Yeah, I mean, we make deals that we don't really plan to abide by in any regard. But you mentioned, building those schools and the railways and everything, and I have to ask you, but at what cost? Right? That's the
You're being very good Western mainstream media reporter.
yes. The ongoing Western meme, and someone posted this on Twitter, so here are some of them. It's Wuhan, the city that appears safe from COVID, but at what cost? Then China's getting smarter, but at what cost? That's from BBC. Serbia rolls out the red carpet for China, but at what cost? And then China invests in Ethiopia, but at what cost? And my favorite though was Bloomberg News put out a report that said China is curing cancer, but at what cost?
Exactly. China can never do anything good. So that's the joke we make. Yeah. So when Western mainstream media reporter, when they cover China, it's very easy. Just at what cost? So even China's doing something good, at what cost? Showing your balance, showing you have criticism. But I think it's a shame, because it stopped people from truly understanding what's happening here. So not only it's pushing forward the xenophobia and the anti-Asian hate. I think it's important of it stopped people from understanding the governance of China, or the successful experience that China have. I'm not saying China has the best governance in the world, or everything China does is good. No, but we, for example, if my country, if China is truly as evil as not functioning well as the Western mainstream media said in the past few decades, how could it rise to the world's #2 GDP? How could it lift 800 million people out of poverty? So that's some remarkable achievements that no other countries has ever done. Developing country from a war-torn, poor, very backward country to the country that has the world's #2 GDP within 4 decades, lift 800 million people out of extreme poverty within 4 decades. That's a remarkable achievement.
Yeah,
And
the 800 million number, I think a lot of Americans might hear that and think like, oh, that's an exaggeration, or maybe she accidentally added a zero. and it's 80 million. No, it's literally 800, over 800 million people pulled out of extreme poverty over the past, I think it's only 20 years or so. And even the West acknowledged that. It was acknowledged by our mainstream media briefly, but then they went on to ignore it. But 800 million is more than double the size of the United States. Having over 2 United States worth of people pulled out of extreme poverty is unbelievable.
Yeah. So I think because I was one of the person that benefit from the development of China. My family come from farmer backgrounds, and see, now we are living a comfortable life, and I can travel around the world and get educated in Western countries. I mean, it was not that something. It's not. I'm saying this not because it's something fancy to do, but it's just something unimaginable to my parents' generation, especially when they only came from like farmer backgrounds. And this kind of story, because I'm a reporter traveling across China, and in some remote regions, in villages, the economic level, the poverty is beyond most people's imagination. It's even beyond my imagination. Even I was born and raised here in China. Not to mention, it's really beyond the imagination to people from the developed countries. But I could see this change in the past few years. So this achievement, the economic growth and the poverty alleviation projects definitely have some very valuable experiences and lessons that other countries can be used. And now we still have billions of people across the world that are still in hunger. They are still struggling with their poverty, so they don't know where their next meal is. So if those countries, those media can fairly analyze China's successful experience, how China did it, and could this poverty alleviation projects can the experience and being borrowed, being implemented, for example, in African countries, in Latin American countries. And if they can analyze it, adopt it, and get rid of what's not working and use what's working, they can help their own populations. I know even in the United States is the world's number one, is the most developed country in the world, but still there's a huge amount of middle class people, working class, and also a lot of homeless people. So if they can look at China's governance fairly, they could use some of those experience to help those people. But I think that's just sad. The media just paint everything China does as bad, as evil, and refuse to learn what's actually functioning, what's actually useful to help their own people.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we live in a critical time in this world, environmentally and otherwise, and it's a time when countries should be working together in order to find the solutions. And the U.S. has no interest in working together with other countries, even the countries that we often consider allies. It's more of a do as we say situation rather than a we want to learn from you and cooperate with you and create a sustainable world with you. I wanted to show another amazing piece of propaganda against China that just came out the other day. This was published by the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank. So the Federal Reserve is one of our central banking arms. There are several across the United States. But they put out this chart, which shows, if it's too small for some people, I apologize, but it shows the amount being spent, top 6 countries by military expenditures. And the blue line is the United States, this curvy one here, and the red line is China. And they're trying to show that China's military expenditure is way overshooting America's military expenditure. However, if you look closely, they've used a little trick here where they say next to each country either left access or right access, meaning the red line for China does not apply to the numbers on the right side, which most people are looking at, the $900 billion, the $1 trillion up there at the top. And in fact, hold on. If you were to actually show this chart correctly, it would look like this. It would show that the Chinese line is nowhere near the American military expenditure if you put them on the same axis. All these little lines down here are the other, whatever, other 5 countries. And the US is way up here, really. And actually, this number isn't even accurate because it's showing us at about 800 billion, but that doesn't include the money we spend on black budgets like the CIA, et cetera. So it's really well over $1 trillion. And China is the red line way down at the bottom. But the Federal Reserve of St. Louis didn't want everyone to know that. So they created this fake chart.
I feel we could just do an episode fully focus on this funny takes on China. All this, just to see all these anti-China narratives. It's hilarious.
Yeah, we could do spend a lot of time on the efforts to propagandize against China. I guess we can move now to I want to talk about climate change and what China is doing for that. People will quickly mention that the 2 greatest emitters on the planet are the United States and China. But if you look at it per capita, it's much worse for the United States. We are by far the top polluter emissions wise if you look at the actual number of people. But many people it benefits them to just say, oh, China is one of the worst, and not actually look at the sheer number of people that are involved. So, I was wondering if you could talk for a few minutes about China's policies on trying to do something about the climate crisis.
Okay. Where to start? So first, I think if you read all this media coverage, they always to make people think that China and India are the biggest evil force that's polluting the world. But I think maybe you saw that news as well. Several years ago, NASA released this satellite image that actually China and India is making the earth greener, because China and India are the biggest countries that planting forests, and that help the earth greener. Mm-hmm. So this is really by NASA. It's not a Chinese company that which they will just say that's China propaganda. It's U.S. Right. Institutions, right? So, and that's the thing. And imagine, and also these 2 countries are the 2 countries that has the largest population, and we are still developing countries. A lot of countries still need to develop the economy to have a better life. And I think it's important to mention that we face this struggle. Not just China is facing this. Many global south, many development countries are facing the same struggles that the developed world want us to share the responsibilities to deal with climate change. Of course, we all have to share the responsibilities, but they don't mention the historical debt that developed countries had, which because of the industrial revolutions, and they developed for such a long time, they polluted so much to the world, and now they want developing countries to share same responsibilities with them. And I think I want to quote this remarkable speech by Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley. She said that she gave this speech at the COP27, I think was in November 2022. And she said, "We were the ones whose blood, sweat, and tears financed the Industrial Revolution. And now we have to face double jeopardy by having to pay the cost as a result of those greenhouse gases from the Industrial Revolution. That is fundamentally unfair." She is very smart. She said it very blatantly, criticized the rich countries are not taking the historical debts. And also I think it was said by Vijay Prashad, the chief of the Tricontinental Institutes for Social Research. He gave this speech and also criticized the rich countries. And you know what? You always give this slogan to say what about the future? What about the future? And want the developing countries to share the same responsibilities. But a lot of those people in those countries, they don't even have a future. They're worrying about the present because billions of them are still in hunger. They are worrying about their present. And you are asking those countries to reduce consumption, to like you need to produce less because we need to have a clean and healthy earth by keeping you hungry and poor, right? That's unfair. But of course, that's I want to point it out this unbalanced responsibilities. But of course, let's take a look at what policies China is taking. And I'm not I don't have the expertise in renewable energies and this probably you need to expert on environmental protections to give you more insight into that. But as someone who has been living in China for my entire life, I can give you some examples of what I saw in the past 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
When I finished my study in the UK 10 years ago, when I returned, fly to Beijing 10 years ago, the air was gray, the smog was so bad. There were probably only 30 days of blue skies within a year. And you could smell the heavy smoke. It's like always smells like someone is burning something in the air. That's what's in Beijing. What was it like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Visibility, the air was so bad. I couldn't see the office building in the CBD even just like 100 meters away. That was so bad. But nowadays, it's not an issue anymore. We have blue skies almost 300 days a year. And smog has never been an issue. That's what China has. That shows the commitment to reduce the air pollution in the past few years. And I cannot name enough rivers that across China has been completely cleared, transformed from heavily polluted, stinky, smelly to now clear waters. And every countryside you go, you will see the slogan we say is like green mountains, blue skies are gold mountains, silver mountains. Means nature is our fortune. These are the real examples that you will see if you live in China in the past few years. The real example, visible examples, how climate, how environment has changed in China. I'm not sure whether other countries have done the same, even though they have shown slogans all the time asking people to use less, buy less, reduce less, eat less. But are there any visible results?
Yeah, they like to put a lot of it on the individual. So they say, hey, you need to go and not get a plastic bag at the store, but we're going to keep pumping out as many plastic bags as we can, and we're going to keep using as much oil as possible, and giant oil subsidies and oil and subsidies to factory farming and all this stuff. So, but they try to say, hey, it's on you. If you just change your light bulbs, we could fix all this, which of course is bullshit, but.
Yeah. But I think it's also important to say that China has shown this. I just gave you the real examples that I saw, but as in terms of policies, actually, China announced that it will aim to reach a peak in its carbon dioxide emissions before 2030. So it just within a few years, by 2030, reach peak carbon dioxide and reach carbon neutrality by 2060. So it's a commitment. It's not just something we say. And this policies has been carried out on a daily basis on our everyday life. You will see buildings, all this office to reduce the amount, the time they use the lighting, and it's being everywhere. And also, in 2021, there was a COP15 meeting in Kunming, Chinese city in Kunming, and China actually launched the called Kunming Biodiversity Fund. That fund is worth China donated 232 billion US dollars, which aims to support biodiversity protections in developing countries. So these are the policies that are taking place and aimed for to help developing countries to deal with the climate challenges, to biodiversity challenges we're doing. And maybe some people may feel, oh, that's are you just saying this? Give beautiful words, beautiful talks. But from my experience, reading the policies that China's government has set, almost all the goals have been achieved. They don't give empty words. So even though some goals sounds ambitious, sounds very far-fetched, but 10 years later, 50 years later, 100 years later, you will see that achieved. Just like how when China said we want to rejuvenate our nation, we want to build a moderately prosperous society within 100 years, boom, now we did it. We want to lift everyone in China out of poverty, boom, we did it by 2020, as we promised. So I don't want to sound like someone who always praised China, but I believe in this because I saw it happen.
Yeah.
If maybe you asked me 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't give you the same answers. But after year, I saw everything being carried out, being planned, being achieved as it promised. I think many Chinese people like me have the faith to the government.
We're almost to the end here. I'm wondering if there's any other topics I haven't gotten to yet that you'd like to touch on.
Let me think. Maybe
I know you cover a lot of topics on your show. So.
Yeah, but I think I just hope everybody can realize what the change of the world, this geopolitical shift, the rise of the global south, not just the rise of China. We have to look at the big picture, not just trapped in the Western world, a rich world. It's like look at the global south. Look at what's happening. Every country, every region want to pursue regional development, and they want to build a new world order. And if you look at Latin America countries, they are having this CELAC meeting right now. This Community for Latin America and the Caribbean. Caribbean states. Africa, China, Africa, we have the FOCAC, which is Forum on China-Africa Communications. And in December, China, the very historic China-Arab States Summit. And also at the end of last year, we had APEC, G20, ASEAN, all these regional groupings, and BRICS. So all these regional groupings. So why these countries are joining these groupings and regional alliances? They want to build an alternative. They want to pursue an alternative and build a new world order. They want to develop. So even though we talk a lot about China, it's not just about China. It's about the world is want to shift a new global order. And sometimes when you see very negative reporting either on China or other countries in the global south, I hope you can think about it, because I think I didn't go into the details of this Countering Chinese Malign Influence Act, because why we always see this death trap narrative appear on almost every Western mainstream media. And if you look at this act, it's very clear, because it's passed by the US Congress. And I think it authorized $300 million US for each of fiscal years, 2020 through 2024, and it's continuing to counter the Chinese influence fund, to counter the malign influence of the Chinese Communist Party globally. And they mentioned the Belt and Road Initiative by name in this act. They want to find malign influence of the Belt and Road Initiative. I don't know what malign influence of China's Communist Party are they referring to. Malign influence to build infrastructure, roads, ports, airport for other countries. So, but and also, and also local newspaper, local journalists in Africa, they find the same thing because according to the Herald of Zimbabwe newspaper, they found that U.S. embassies was funding local independent journalists and certain groups to create chaos protests outside of Chinese companies and read negative reports about China's projects under the Belt and Road Initiative. That 300 million years 300 million US dollars every year for like 5 or 6 years. That's a lot of money just to badmouth another country and just to read negative reporting on other countries' projects. They could use the money to invest in some projects that can actually build something to those
We, we,
countries.
we don't
Beat-
invest in helping people. That's not what we do here. We invest in bombs and guns.
That's that. So I think it's important that it's not about defeating the United States. It's not about China's rights. It's about the world's rights. It's about building a community with a shared future. Everybody wants to. No, it's really build a community with a shared future. We are all in this. Even the Belt and Road Initiative, it welcomes the United States to join. It's not excluding United States. So like, because it's a transcontinental infrastructure work that we can build a land bridge connecting every continent, even to the most landlocked regions in the world, and we can all develop our economy. And that also invites all the Western countries, inviting the United States to join because we want to develop rather than
we could use some help with our bridges. We have something like 50,000 structurally deficient bridges in the United States that could collapse at any moment. But we apparently don't have the money to fix that. We only have the money for bombs. So if you're into building bridges, come on over, Jingjing. We could use your help.
And I hope like you can visit China someday. Now we are looking forward for more face-to-face, people-to-people exchanges, and it's really a lot of expats friends that I know before they came to China. They all have this negative image of China in their minds because of years of reading the negative reports. They think, "Oh my God, like, will I be able to buy very basic things like in China? Will be bribed? Will I lose my kidney when I landed in China because someone will steal my organs and stuff?" So all this is like out of but when they arrive here and lived here for 1 year, 2 years, they change their mind because this country, the people through interactions with the local people, through seeing all this culture, everything by yourself. And I hope, Lee, you can come to China one day to see for yourself.
That sounds like it'd be fun. Yeah, and I mean, the other thing you're speaking to is the fact that all people are not a monolith. Everybody in America is not the same. Everybody in China is not the same, and it's a problem when we're told that every discussion should just come down to this people versus that people, rather than people around the world working together for a sustainable and prosperous, and I mean that not in the dollar signs way, but prosperous world going forward. Really been an honor to talk to you. Thanks so much for taking the time and talking to me from the other side of the world.
Thank you so much for having me today.
And people should check out your shows on YouTube. It's called Talk It Out. Is that right?
Yes, you can find my channel by typing my name, Li Jingjing. It has English name and Chinese name is my channel, or you can also find me on Twitter. But I'm shadow banned by Twitter because with the label. But if you're lucky, you'll find me on Twitter.
Well, you aren't doing good work unless you've been shadow banned. So
thank you.
Thanks again. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
All right, folks. Hope you enjoyed that interview with Li Jingjing. That's a pleasure to talk to her. I think it's a good idea to get the other side of the view on the deluge of propaganda we get here in the United States. God forbid we get someone else's viewpoint who's not just pushing out U.S. empire talking points. This show, as are all my interviews and my most censored news episodes, is completely funded by you. This is that's how we do it. And hopefully you can join at patreon.com/behindtheheadlines. But you can also now, they just started this. If you're on YouTube, you can click the join button. It's next to either Behind the Headlines or Mint Press, whichever channel you're watching it on. Down at the bottom there, it says join and next to subscribe, I believe. So subscribe is for free. So please do that. Join is, I think, $4.90 or something. And excuse me. And it gets you a bunch of cool perks like exclusive chat and things like that. So I hope you will join up and support the show that way, or support the show on Patreon. Yesterday, if you haven't already seen it and you want more and you're like, God damn it, why is this ending now? All is lost. I mean, you maybe should talk to someone if you're yelling that loud. But if you want to, and you haven't already, check out my interview from yesterday with the host of the Gorilla History podcast. I think you're going to love that one. That was yesterday. It's also available at youtube.com/behindtheheadlines. Previous weeks, Stella Assange, Julian Assange's father as well, John Shipton, Chris Hedges, Scott Ritter, Richard Wolff. So many amazing guests. And I hope you will, Ben Norton, of course, I hope you will check those out at youtube.com/behindtheheadlines. There's no most censored news episode this week because I had to take Monday and Tuesday off. So wasn't able to put one together this week, but I'll be back with another one of those next week, and keep fighting.